Hello everyone, I am Katia with Lunar Sun Creations and welcome to the Mix and Match mini album tutorial part 1 version 2. So this is the second album that I'm making. If you've followed the first Mix and Match album, it uses 5 specific sized pieces of cardstock over and over to create different page designs. So we use those 5 pieces in different ways to create multiple page designs. So this version 2 is all new page designs, but we're still using those exact same 5 sized pieces that we used in the first one. Unfortunately, I can't show you that first album because I've already sold it. However, I will link down below the walkthrough for the first version. So first we're going to go over the supplies that you will need and then we'll get going. Okay, so first you will need your paper trimmer and your scoreboard with your bone folder and scoring tool. So those are essential. Then we will need score tape. An ATG gun. You can use score tape for everything if you don't have an ATG gun, so this I just use this for the pattern paper part of it. You will need some magnets. I use really thin, they're 10mm by 2mm disc magnets. I do sell these in my Etsy shop. We will need, of course, some cardstock. So I'm putting the whole thing together with 8.5 by 11 cardstock. This is an 80-pound cardstock. The album uses about 26 sheets, I believe. I tried to use as much of my scraps as I could, so it was hard to kind of keep track of exactly how many pieces I used, but I think it was about 25, 26. You'll need your pattern paper. For this album, I will be using the Spice Market Kit by Ella and Viv. I think I only used 6 or 7 sheets of it, so you don't need tons of pattern paper. However, I did do a few sheets of coordinating cardstock as well, and in different colors. So if you want to do just the pattern paper, you'll probably use the entire pack. You will need at least one Tyvek envelope to strengthen some of the different seams and on our binding and the cover. I also sell Tyvek in my Etsy shop. And then we will need some chipboard for the covers. I buy these in large cases, so mine's like a medium weight chipboard, maybe like 2-3 millimeters or so. It's a medium weight. I usually actually bundle it up, like I usually cut 2 pieces the same and glue them together to make it a heavyweight chipboard. Next time I'm going to buy heavyweight to begin with. So you'll need some of that for the covers. And then we will need, this is optional, but I like to ink all of my edges. So for this one I'm using Distress ink in Black Soot. My little dauber, so I ink up all of my edges. It just kind of adds a little extra. And then you will need any kind of embellishments that you would like to use. That part you can kind of, I'll show you as I go along what I'm going to be using, because I don't quite know yet. I kind of make that part up on the fly. But any kind of embellishments that you think you might need. You will also require scissors and a ruler, and I think that's about it. Alright, so I'm going to clean this up and then we're going to get to crafting. Okay, so these mix and match albums, they are put together a little bit differently than your normal mini album. What I do is cut out all the pieces to begin with and score them all and prep them all, and then we make our base pages, and then we just have to grab pieces and put the pages together, so it's a lot easier. It's almost like an assembly line kind of way of putting things together. So I will give you the dimensions of each of the pieces and then we'll go from there. So the A pieces, we're going to need 8 A pieces for the entire album. The A pieces will measure 8.5 by 4.5 inches. So you'll need 8 of those. The B pieces are a 6.5 by 6.5 inch square. We're going to need 4 of these. The C pieces will measure 5 3/8 by 6 3/4 inches, and we're going to need 5 of those. Your D pieces are 6 inches by 7 3/8, and we're going to need 8 of those. And the E pieces are 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and we're going to need 4 of these. Now the E piece is the only one that is going to be scored differently. The rest of the pieces, all the A's will be scored the same, B's the same, C's and D's the same. The E pieces, we're going to score them in a couple different ways. And lastly, you'll need a few hinges to put pieces together. And I'm just using my scraps, so just keep the cutoffs from cutting out your A to E pieces. And we just need a few that are 1.5 inches wide. And it doesn't matter how long they are, we're going to kind of cut them as we go, as we need them. So mine are a whole bunch of different lengths. I just took all the scraps that were around that size, cut them all to 1.5 inches, and then we're going to use them as we go. Okay, so for all of the A pieces, each of the A's are going to be scored at half on the 4.5 inch side. Okay, and then we're going to rotate a 1/4 turn and score them again at half and 8 on the 8.5 inch side. Okay, so we're going to do all 8 of the A pieces exactly the same. Okay, so 1/2 inch on the 4.5 inch side, rotate a 1/4 turn, and then half and 8. So do that to all 8 of your A pieces. Okay, and the last one. Alright, fantastic. So there are your A pieces scored. Set those aside and grab your B pieces. Now your B's are going to be scored at half on one side. I mean, it's a square, so any side you choose. Scored at half, and then we are going to rotate it and score at half and 6. Okay, so do the same for all 4 of your B pieces. Now for anyone who is really new to mini album making, when we score a line on a piece of cardstock, we create an indent in the cardstock, correct? So I refer to this as a valley, and then the opposite side where there's a raised edge is called the mountain. So if you ever hear me say something like, put your score tape on the valley side, that means it needs to go on the side where the indent is. And we always fold a score line away from the indent, and that helps keep the integrity of the paper, keeps the fibers from cracking. Okay, your C pieces We've got 5 C pieces, and they are going to be scored at half on the 6 3/4 inch side. And that's it. That's the only line for that one. So all of the C pieces get scored at half on the 6 3/4 inch side. All right, that's the C's, the D's. We'll need 8 D's, and they all get scored at half on the 6 inch side. So every single one of them the same way, half on the 6 inch side. Okay, so the 6 inches is at the top, and we're just scoring at half. Now, if anyone did follow my version 1 of this album, you might already have a lot of these pieces already scored and prepped and cut out and everything. You might be able to skip all of this. The E pieces, like I said, we're going to do them just a little bit differently. So for 2 of the E pieces, we're going to score them at half, or sorry, for 2 of the E pieces, we're going to score at 5 1/2 on the 11 inch side. So there's 1 and 2. The third E piece, we are going to score at 2 inches and 6 7/8. And then the fourth E piece, we are going to score it at 3 5/8. So just past the 3 1/2, 3 5/8. And then we're going to flip the piece over and score it again at 7 3/8. So we flip it over because, like I said, you always fold in, like, away from the indent. So this piece is going to have folds going in opposite directions. That's why we flip it over. Okay, so those are your E pieces. So now we're going to put score tape on all of our 1/2 inch sections so we can get our scoreboard out of the way for now. Alright, so starting with the A's again, we're going to put score tape on the valley side of all of the 1/2 inch sections. So all the way around 3 sides of the A piece, like that. So we're going to do that to all 8 of them, and then we're going to miter the corners. So you want to make sure with the score tape that you leave a tiny space between the score line itself and the score tape, so that when you fold on the score line, you don't have adhesive right on that line. Okay, so you want to leave a little bit of space in between the score line and the tape. Okay, so do it to all 8 pieces. Okay, so once you've got score tape on all of those, we're going to miter the corners. So by mitering, we're just cutting off a little bit at an angle off the corners where the score tape is. Where there's score lines that meet, you cut it in an angle until you get to where the score lines meet, and then angle your scissors a little bit and then cut out at an angle. So you have something that looks like that. And we do this so that when we fold on our score lines, you don't see any of that little bit poking up here. So it just makes for a cleaner a cleaner look to your pieces. Okay, so we're going to do that same process, so it should look like that. We're going to do that to all 8 of the A's. I'm going to do that, I'll do one more with you, and then I'll do the rest off camera, and we'll come back and do the B's. Okay, so cut at an angle there, and then cut in at an angle till they meet, and out at an angle like that. Alright, okay, so I'm going to do the rest of these off camera. I'll be right back. Okay, so you should now have 8 pieces that look like that. Alright, so those are your A's. We're going to do, actually we'll get the biddies out of the way here. Bye bye biddies. Okay, so for the B's, we're going to do the same process. So I've done a couple off camera just to save a bit of time. So we're going to put score tape on all 3 of the sides that have a 1/2 inch section. Valley side, leaving a tiny little gap. And then we will miter the corners. So because these pieces are exactly the same, you can also miter them together. I'm all about time management. If you can try and create an album in an afternoon, then you know all the little tips and tricks, just make sure it's lined up, and they definitely help. Okay, so those are your B pieces. They should look like that. So with the corner the same way as the A's. Alright, and then the C pieces are super simple. The C's and the D's actually. It's just the one line of score tape. And then we're gonna miter those corners. So you only miter corners that have score tape on them. Okay, and I've already done the other ones. You should have 5 C pieces all looking like that. The D's also just have one line of score tape. Okay, and again I've done some to save you having to watch me do it on every single one. Okay, so they will look like that, and you should have 8 of the D pieces. Alright, and then the E pieces, so we've got the 3 different folds. We've got one that's going to be like an accordion fold. This one is going to fold and have this piece kind of meet it. Like that. And then the other 2 are just in half. Okay, and they don't need any score tape at all. That's where we're going to use our hinges. Okay, so set those aside, and now we will get our base pages together, and then we can start putting the pages together. Okay, get your scoreboard again. So the album is going to have 6 pages, which means we need 3 base pages, and there'll be like a page on either side of the base page, alright? So put your 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper into your scoreboard on the 8.5 inch side, and we're going to score at half, and at 8, and then we're going to do a little rotation and score again at 5.5 right down the center. Okay, so do that to all 3. Okay, and while we have the scoreboard out, I'm just gonna grab a few random pieces of hinge material they're all 1.5 inch wide, and I'm just gonna score some at 3/4. Okay, I'm not measuring them. I'm just gonna score a few at 3/4, and then we can just kind of grab them and use them as we need. Okay, so just a couple, I might do one more. I can't remember how many we need, so. And the cool thing about this album is that, I mean, between the first version and this second version, there is 6 pages, and then the front and the back cover of each album. So I've done 16 different combinations of these 5 pieces, with none of them repeating. And I'm sure there's many, many more versions that you can come up with yourself. I absolutely love my really elaborate pop-up albums that I have in my Etsy shop. But sometimes simple can also be pretty awesome. I honestly struggle with simple. My hubby always bugs me about that, because something that I might think is simple might not be simple for someone else. I'm always trying to like go bigger and better and more elaborate and more layers, and sometimes that's not always needed. And I tend to go way over the top sometimes. Okay, so for the base pages, I also talk too much sometimes. For the base pages, we are going to just put score tape on half of the 1/2 inch section on each side. So we're just going up to that center score line. If you go over a little bit, not a big deal, because we're going to be cutting off the other part of the 1/2 inch score lines that do not have any score tape. Okay, so your 3 base pages right now look like that. All right, so now we are going to cut off that whole bit and that whole bit off of each one. Okay, so we're just going to cut along the score line until we get to the center score line, and then we're going to cut out at an angle, like we're mitering. Okay, so do that on either side. And then these 2 other corners we're also going to miter. Okay, so now your base page should look like that. So do that to the other 2. Cut along the score line. And it doesn't matter which half you put the score tape on. As long as it's on the valley side. Okay, and then the third one. Oops, cut a little bit too far in on that one. Okay, so you should have 3 that look like that. Get rid of these. Okay, so fold on all of the score lines and crease them with your bone folder. And then we're going to remove the backing from the score tape. And fold that down. So now you've got a base page with an opening there, closed on that side. Easy peasy. So there's one, so get your other two done here. You can also fold and crease the folds on all the rest of your pieces if you like, or you can do it as we go, completely up to you. And then fold that over. And our third one. Hi, buddy. How you doing, Zuri? Hi, handsome guy. Are you here to help? Of course you are. Yeah? Are you a helper? Of course you're a helper. A lot of you may know Zuri from almost every crafting video that I've ever done. He is such a helper in the studio. Oh, I love you too. Okay, Mommy's gotta work. Mommy's gotta work. Oh, such a good boy. Such a good boy. Can you say hi to everybody? No. You're really intruding right now. Okay, I'm gonna give him just a little bit of snuggles, and then we can continue on. He almost fell off the table.